The Powering Procurement podcast is brought to you by Atomis, source to contract software designed to save you time and money. Hello and welcome to Powering Procurement, a podcast by Atomis, where we unpack the world of procurement and supply chain management with the help of industry leaders. I'm your host, Lloyd, and this is our resident expert, Gareth Burch.
Hi, after 20 years in procurement, I may be billed as an expert, but believe me, I'm here to learn too.
Each episode, together with our expert guests, we'll dive into specific challenges and opportunities facing the procurement industry today.
And we'll explore easy wins and longer-term strategies to help you rise to the challenge of driving value through your work while showcasing the power of procurement.
So let's get going. Welcome to Powering Procurement. Today we are absolutely thrilled to be joined by John Coyne, who now leads the procurement function at Birmingham City Council, one of the largest local authorities in Europe. John's career in procurement and commercial strategy spans more than 3 decades across sectors as varied as healthcare, government, and even as the first commercial director of Liverpool Football Club. His expertise in building high-performing procurement functions and driving transformation are second to none.
John's work in procurement isn't just about streamlining processes. It's about creating real, lasting value for community. At Birmingham Council, he's guiding the procurement strategy to be both resilient and responsive, whilst keeping an eye on the opportunities in the upcoming Procurement Act. Today, we'll explore his vision for Birmingham's future, the changes he's prioritising, and the longer-term impact. Welcome, John.
Thank you, Gareth.
Yeah, it's great to have you with us, John, and we're really looking forward to hearing about your vision going forward and the new role there. But I suppose to begin the podcast, we'd love to learn a little bit more about you. It's a question we often ask our guests as the first question, which is just to share a bit about your journey with us into procurement. You know, what drove you into it and what keeps you motivated as well?
I think really, I'd have to be honest and say default in one sense of procurement. I'm very much a commercial individual, and of course procurement as an art sits very much within a commercial life cycle. So I've a lot of experience. You've mentioned some of that going way back. I started my career in the UK, coming over to work in Irish tourism and spent 12 years doing that. And then from there, I took an opportunity to go into Liverpool Football Club as their first commercial director. But the common golden thread running through my career is commerciality, really, and how we use money, spend particularly, to actually leverage out greater returns for, in the case of sport and tourism, you know, ultimately for the private sector organisations that you're charged to deliver for. Later in my career, the last 15, 18 years, I've worked very much within public government settings. And then it's all about using the public purse, really, to be able to deliver for communities that you're working within, and ensuring that you're really fulfilling your social obligations, particularly, because ultimately we are here to deliver. In this case now, I find myself in Birmingham, and it is for me my local main principal city. I live about 25 miles outside Birmingham in a district called Stourbridge, but very familiar obviously as well with Wales, because I'm only 8 weeks in my job here in Birmingham, and have come here sadly to leave after holding a very similar post in the Welsh government, and clearly looking to take a huge amount of learning that Wales is leading on to ensure that we can utilise both procurement and other commercial levers to deliver for the people of Birmingham.
Personally, I'd like to focus on Liverpool, but unfortunately, it's the Powering Procurement podcast. Now you're in your role in Birmingham Council. What are some of the key challenges and opportunities you see in shaping procurement?
Okay, well, let's have to start with the sort of a bit of a brief explanation, because I'm sure many of your listeners will be aware of Birmingham doesn't, at the moment, I suppose, ring out as a positive endorsement of how to do things. We're a largest local authority in Europe, and sadly, we're bankrupt. And that's a very well publicised situation it finds itself in for a number of strategic reasons. But I think fundamentally because maybe as a local authority, we've lost sight of, in the past, what was our sole responsibility and function, and really become maybe much more focused on sort of high level spending as opposed to actually getting to the grassroots, which local authorities need to refocus and drive really the agenda around how we can do things much better for our local communities by using some of our tools in the box. And one of the big tools that I'm very keen to use is over £1 billion worth of annual spend into the Birmingham city region. And that's also, surrounding local authorities here. The West Midlands conurbation is fairly unique in the sense of there's 8 to 9 quite large local authorities that neighbour each other, Birmingham being principally the largest. But so setting the context and the scene, my first 8 weeks here has been really understanding about where Birmingham City Council is and where we need to go. And really part of that journey is not going to be fast because we've got to change an approach and a culture here. And then we've got to look to embed long-term levers, which actually can ensure that we're utilising our spend efficiently, creating value for money, but above all, creating, returns for the people who live and work and reside in Birmingham.
That's really interesting, John. And I think it feels really timely for us. As you say, you're 8 weeks into the role to actually be speaking to you now about this. And we feel that, we're going to get quite a unique perspective and certainly your insight as you're looking ahead now for the future. And the job that you've got in hand, really. And it's a new role, isn't it, that you're undertaking at the moment, Director of Procurement and Commercial. Is that because of the task that you're faced with? Was that the reason for creating the new role?
Yeah, absolutely. For those, again, listening who may not be overly familiar, when local authorities get themselves into difficulty, and in the case of Birmingham, ultimately declare bankruptcy, central government have to come to the rescue in effect, because clearly we can't be allowed to go how private sector organisations would go when they reach bankruptcy. We have to provide services, crucial services in some cases, to our people and citizens. So the government steps in and they put in place, in Birmingham's case, a range of commissioners who specialise in different areas. And particularly the commissioner that I am responsible to, as well as the elected members here and senior officers, actually determined that one of our challenges, or one of the challenges of the local authority, was the lack of commercial focus and commercial vision. And that translated across a whole host of areas. Procurement, absolutely for sure. But, procurement is a part of the process in one sense. It's procuring things. But actually, without good contract management, which is often a neighbour of procurement, procurement doesn't work. And then really without an overarching commercial life cycle strategy around what we're looking to really deliver through our spend. And it's not just about value for money. It's not anymore about low cost or low price. It's around how we can spend our pound well. And well means, can it create employment? Can it create better community services? Can it create better health and social care background and contribution into those communities, as well as clearly being efficient, contributing to net zero, decarbonisation that now the world is very much focused on, just coming to the back end of COP 29, I think. So that's something that we've been missing here, is how we close the loop around ensuring that the whole commercial life cycle, including the critical element of procurement, is really very sharp and very focused on what our responsibilities and our strategic goals are.
And obviously you've only been there a mere 8 weeks, but how have you found that transition in 8 weeks? Because what you've outlined there is such a difficult ask for most senior professionals anyway. But I can't imagine doing it in a business which ultimately is bankrupt.
Yeah. Well, I suppose it's sort of, again, firstly, I'm hugely confident. We have great people who work here. Maybe, the direction and the depth of leadership has not been there to support them. Some of our approaches are not really complementary in relation to a lot of our procurement activity, for example, has been very siloed. And that's not appropriate for us really to utilise our combined spend to deliver. So, for example, such a large local authority, at the moment we're buying our stationery from a whole host of different suppliers. We're not going to get scale or volume benefit from doing that. We need what's often referred to in procurement terms as a framework, whereby we have a single supplier and everyone buys at from that single supplier at negotiated procurement rates, and that way we start to then both improve service, improve efficiency, and improve value for money. And by doing that, we should be circular economy, which is very much a steal from the Welsh government. How we start to create a circular economy here. So ultimately, our spend should always be being recycled throughout Birmingham, be it benefits for its citizens or be it benefits because we can do a lot more with our limited budget spend.
I was really interested to hear you at the beginning, John, talk about wanting to take some of the lessons that you'd learned in Wales with you to Birmingham. So it would be great to hear a little bit more about that. And also, I think something, Gareth, that we've been talking quite a lot on the podcast series about, of course, the new Procurement Act, and whether you see, elements of that you're going to be able to use to your benefit, perhaps making you more agile and assisting with the situation that Birmingham's now in.
Yeah, very much so. And I think they're complementary. And I know from my time leading procurement in Wales, you have your own specific legislation there as well, some of which the Social Partnership Act, and then also piggybacking on the Procurement Act. Procurement Act is recognising that maybe in the past there's been too much focus on value. So to me, a key critical change is this acronym which is often referred to as MEAT, Most Economical Advantageous Tender, is now changing to MAT, Most Advantageous Tender. And once you start to do that, it is really a big sort of mind shift, because all of a sudden we're not necessarily talking about cheapest price or best price. We're talking about, ultimately a price that delivers, and that can be delivering value, but can be delivering benefits, can be creating employment. All of those things very much which are enshrined in the Future Generations Act in Wales. So absolutely, I'm really focused on how we take the best and bring some of that to Birmingham, because ultimately the net beneficiaries will be the people of Birmingham, who are the people that we're here to serve. So certainly, going back to Procurement Act, there's some great changes being enshrined within the new legislation. Clearly delayed slightly, and there's now the work of a national procurement statement being undertaken by the UK government, which again slightly deviates, because Wales is fortunate that they've had their own national procurement statement, but we would be aligned to the UK government, and we've been very much involved in the consultation process that has come about as a result of the desire of the current government now to ensure that we're embedding a new national procurement statement. And some of that is going to be clearly, I would think, linked into the mission-driven objectives of the current government. And that is a positive as well, because equally, not too dissimilar to a national government, local authorities have to be very focused on mission-driven. And what we need to deliver the best for our people and our communities, which will be very different maybe from affluent local authorities. We have some of the highest deprived rates in the UK, and if not in Europe. We have some pockets of our communities here with the highest unemployment in the UK. But still, we're a hugely outward-looking city. We're the second city. We have a lot progressively happening here. HS2 sort of terminal really being in the heart of the city here. So the future's looking certainly extremely bright. What I am not naive about is how long and how hard that upward journey will be. So if you talk of practicalities, I've inherited a procurement function here which needs a lot of help, needs a lot of rebuilding, and needs really to be fit for purpose for the next 20 years. We need then to bring into that, all the other elements of commerciality. Again, we can have the finest procurement operation in the world, but if we don't have a similar fine contract management function, we're in real risk that the best procurement in the world won't deliver the results, because we have to ensure that suppliers and supply chain are fully engaged with us and they're with us on this journey of change that we're trying to deliver. And one of the easiest ways for procurement people to improve on letting of contracts when they come up for renewal is to listen and to build in really critical and vital feedback from suppliers. Suppliers know how to supply. Often, sometimes, we've just lost track of, listening as opposed to maybe talking at the supply chain. And that's something that we are very conscious of embedding here. A long way to go, because we haven't really engaged with our supply chain here in the Midlands. And we need to be doing that. We need to be identifying how we can help small, medium enterprises, social partnerships, and other social organisations have a fair crack of the whip. So that's certainly a plan very much of how we build a particular unit to engage with our supply chain here. And then lastly, the commercial life cycle, because again, it's not purely procurement will deliver the benefits. In Birmingham, because of the size and scale of the local authority, we have 60 arm's length bodies. These can be trading companies that the local authority has established. It can be arm's length bodies. It can be a form of TECL company. But all of these organisations are primarily owned and operated by Birmingham City Council. Many of them, as I say, arm's length from the council. But we have to be clear that whatever strategic approach we're adopting, all of these other organisations are similarly adopting those same approaches, because otherwise we end up in a position whereby we could be delivering and contributing really well to the net zero goals, but then we discover a wholly owned arm's length organisation is actually not embedding net zero goals, and we're undoing the good work we're doing. So it is very much having a common vision around how commerciality can help us to deliver against all of those future well-being impacts that are going to be critical to us and our people and future generations. I mean, that's one of the, I think, absolute spot-on things that Wales has. They have that focus of the Future Generation Act, because it's not necessarily about today. It's about today, tomorrow, and, 25 years' time.
Picking up on one of the points you mentioned just then, John, around having that operational team, but then supported by almost technology. How do you feel AI and data analytics, what do you feel the part of AI and data analytics will play in helping your team, but also what potential challenges do you anticipate?
Okay. Well, firstly, I think, again, they're critical developments for the future. I think particularly in the public sector, procurement as a profession has been slow to embrace digital technology. And artificial intelligence, particularly, I don't believe holds the fears that some people do in relation to actually we should be utilising artificial intelligence to do the basics. Where at the moment we've got very valuable, highly skilled individuals doing that. What artificial intelligence won't replace is, not yet anyway, and hopefully for not a long time, the thinking, the creative, strategic thinking. Anybody, and this is where people do have to be careful, anyone receiving sort of applications from candidates seeking new employment, don't be using artificial intelligence, because whilst that can set out the application, it can also make you look a complete idiot, as we say in Ireland, because actually it doesn't have the ability to creatively plan a letter, plan an application, and therefore it makes considerable mistakes. It can do the basics where you have, the same letter going out to 1,000 council taxpayers, for example. That's where AI can really deliver, but it can't deliver around how we utilize and how we really put our shoulder into leveraging, all of the key well-being impacts that we need to leverage out of our procurement. It has no understanding around that. So it's really embracing technology for what it's really able to do at this time, and utilizing that and embracing it and freeing up bandwidth to be able to then spend and redeploy people into areas that artificial intelligence won't succeed. Very similar data. We don't really utilize, my view, sufficiently enough the data that's at our grasp. We don't report against this sufficiently, and that's something, again, we have to get better, much better at. Birmingham, we have a long way to go there. I need to be in a position, and I want to be in a position, where in 3-4 years' time we're able to produce annual reports that's showing our spend, showing how that spend is delivering and influencing all of those well-being impacts, where we can actually track back to whether a particular contract created employment, where did it create employment, and who benefited from that contract letting. And as I say, we have a long way to go with that, and we will duty bound, reverting back to the Procurement Act, we need to be getting a lot more smarter around how we develop procurement pipelines, because there's going to be an obligation on us to publish those. And also on our contracts register, we need to get a lot better on how we do the fundamentals, because, that drives our future. Because looking back is the learning. We need to embrace and take forward that learning to improve year on year, contract on contract, procurement on procurement. And particularly data is critical for that. Without the right data, it drives the majority of things, even beyond the procurement world.
And actually data, the phrase data is king is certainly something, Gareth, isn't it? We've heard quite a lot during this podcast series. And we also know with AI, it's only as good, isn't it, as the data that it's got access to. So really, really important discussion there, I think. Really want to pick up, John, on something you were talking about there, which was forward-looking. And obviously that is largely what your role is all about there at Birmingham City Council. So with that in mind, and I suppose drawing in what we've been looking at over the Powering Procurement podcasts about forward-looking, it's about sustainability, it's about social value and the importance now of that in public procurement. So it'd be interesting to hear from you about how you're embedding that now in the plans for Birmingham City Council going forward.
And that's going to be a fundamental building block that we need to firstly put in place. But then, year on year, as we develop and as we fulfill our potential, we need to start to roll that out. So again, as you'd appreciate, any major local authority, actually, our obligation is to help all those that avail of the local authority. So we're still very underdeveloped here about how we're using our skills, our expertise to support, for example, colleagues in schools and colleges across the Birmingham footprint, how we're also ensuring that we're joining up with other public sector organisations like the NHS. So if you look very closely at some of our spend, we're clearly double spending, because neighbouring NHS trusts and community and primary care organisations will be spending in areas that we as a local authority are statutory obliged to spend in. So we have to become a much more smarter approach to how we're supporting other organisations. Because clearly, if we're able to deliver savings for education, that ultimately drops down to the bottom line of the local authority. Because 9 times out of 10, the majority of the funding they will receive will come via the local authority, often through central government. So it's really how we ensure that, we get our own house in order and working well, and then we begin to, blossom or spread that out as through best practice. And again, we have a lot, to look to, dare I say, Wales, to support us in that. The creation of the Keyed Centre of Excellence that has been accessed by many people in the procurement world in Wales. It's something ultimately we need to be looking to mirror, because again, we have such a huge volume and spending power up here in the Midlands. So it's working with neighbouring local authorities. We have to really be coming together so that we're both mirroring and complementing each other. We're also investing in some of that, infrastructure we heard about, data, AI, and modern technology and digital offerings to actually, really ensure that we're working together as one voice, one profession.
And do you feel that some of the new functionality being introduced through procurement reform, such as the central digital platform or the supplier information service, not possibly from February, but onwards, would help you deliver some of these activities?
Yes, it will. I think, as you say quite rightly, and I think hopefully our colleagues in Cabinet Office who are charged with the responsibility of rolling out the Act have always said that they recognise, in these early days, because of some of the really fundamental shifts, it will be a soft rollout because, organisations such as our own here in Birmingham will still be left wanting in relation to actually hitting the ground running. Should we go live in February? So we will need to learn from what others are doing, and we need to certainly learn from some of the advances and some of the improvements, such as central register. Also, similarly, on being able to publish and being very much more transparent around where our spend is going. We have to be marking our own homework, and we have to have others also marking our homework. And we do that by putting it on public display. And that is certainly where, some of the gain, some of the returns through the new Procurement Act will really start to deliver. But I think this is, absolutely long haul. And I know certainly, that's the view taken by both central government. And I think that's why they were both, dare I say, brave enough to realise that they needed to maybe postpone the go live, which was due in October, to first quarter of 25 to make sure that everything was joined up. We don't want to be going at this twice. We want to really get it right if we can the first time, on the basic understanding that it's going to take 2 or 3 years to embed all of that in and to actually have it working so that we realise the benefits that everybody is so keen to deliver against.
And John, actually Lisa Stubbs, the head of open and transparent contracting at Cabinet Office, has been a guest on the podcast series. So it was really interesting to hear from her. One of the key aspects of the new legislation is opening up, isn't it, public tenders to SMEs and indeed to social enterprises as well. I bear in mind what you were saying about the challenges that you have because of the legacy that you've walked into there at Birmingham, in terms of there hadn't been that much connection with suppliers, but now you're going to be looking to be reaching out to these SMEs and social enterprises as well. How do you see them supporting Birmingham's local economy? And I suppose the opportunity perhaps that you do see there.
Yeah, they're critical ultimately, because generally I have found my experience of social enterprises, SMEs, they're absolutely both embedded and enshrined within the local communities because they're serving those local communities. So whilst, clearly there is a role and a function for huge global private sector organisations, and they create tremendous employment up here in the Midlands region, not least in Birmingham. If we're really going to change communities, if we're going to improve those communities, the most challenged of those communities, we have to be working with, listening to and talking constantly with the people in those communities that know how they can make that difference and that change to those communities. And that really, to me, is absolutely where SMEs and social enterprises and, sort of dynamic purchasing frameworks are critical, because we need to ensure that we're positively engaging with those organisations, and that we are setting out to at least ensure that we can evidence where we have worked with those organisations, whilst not wishing to be controversial by any means. If we are letting contracts way beyond the Birmingham footprint, we have to question that is money going out to our community, that is spend going out to our community. And whilst, we are charged under the current regulations and the new regulations to ensure that we fulfill procurement, the new Act gives us a lot of tools in our box to be able to ensure that we can, take all of those critical well-being impacts, still deliver economically and still deliver often for the best price. But actually, we can do that by embracing our own homegrown organisations who will automatically invest back into the community of Birmingham.
And picking up on that, so apologies, maybe a bit of a direct question here. Large companies, enterprise companies such as Microsoft, etc., where you're trying to keep that business within Birmingham, would that be looking to transact with local IT companies within Birmingham to support your business, opposed to the larger enterprise UK companies?
Yeah, very much so. You may know one of the big drivers, one of the big ingredients for Birmingham being in the difficult financial position it's in is, through its huge IT program, which has gone badly wrong and has led to huge overspend. And I think there's lessons to be learned there in the sense of, there are many, many IT solutions which are already developed and off the shelf. We don't necessarily need to reinvent the wheel here. And there's a lot of correlation between the same in relation to procurement. Some private sector organisations are doing huge work around procurement and fulfilling their social responsibility, which they're obliged to do under the Company Act legislation, and particularly in this country. So we need to be looking at how public sector can learn from private, and also how hopefully we can embrace private sector much more in partnership models. But equally, it is the horses for courses. We have a lot of quite low or small activity that we're undertaking here in Birmingham that actually doesn't need the big high street names such as a Microsoft or a Google or we want to name. Some of those services can be delivered by more than competent homegrown industries here on our doorstep in Birmingham, some of which are not actually minis. They've developed and grown over the last 20, 25 years to be punching weight, with any of the national organisations that we can see on our either our high street or, we see in the news daily. So it's that combination. But I think also we're on a bound to ensure that wherever we can, we're spending the money in a circular economy fashion. So rather than it being taken out of, potentially certainly the Birmingham, Midlands, UK, and redistributed to, in some cases, shareholders overseas, we're looking at how we can proactively ensure that money enters into a circular economy here in Birmingham.
So, John, you're talking about keeping the pound local, aren't you? And I suppose another direct question, if you like, from me, which is, how bold are you going to be? Because inevitably there will be challenges, won't there, in embedding inclusivity in procurement?
Yes, and we have to be bold. And that's sometimes, where in the past, again, I think maybe a charge that could be levelled at us in public sector around commerciality, around procurement, around contract management, we've not been anywhere near bold enough. And certainly I'll be as bold as I can be. Ultimately, you have to bring people with you. These are not solo shows here, but actually one of the things I've picked up in my 8 weeks here at Birmingham is that they are hugely committed to ensuring that Birmingham's spend is absolutely put into a circular economy model, and that it actually delivers legacy for future generations. And that's why, to me, I see particularly a lot more focus here, not too dissimilar, as I say, to your Future Generations Act, around actually much greater delivery than just what we know to be social value. That's really important and critical, but actually defines social value. And I think the Future Generation Act defines it really well. And I think, some of those things around supporting local employment, ensuring that we're, either increasing or delivering skills and training opportunities, reduce the use of natural resources, make sure we're contributing and have absolutely embedded in our commercial strategies how we deliver net zero and decarbonisation. All of these things will actually ensure that we are building strong, cohesive communities for future generations. And as I say, the elected members here at Birmingham particularly, and the new officer structure as it's put in place and built, are very keen to ensure that we do that.
It sounds really exciting, to be honest.
It is, and I must confess on a personal note, coming to work is a real blessing at the moment and a spring in the step. That's not to, underlie the journey and the scale of change. But certainly I always said when I came here, I came, ultimately for the long term. It was the only thing that managed to pry me away from Wales. And it is ultimately a home city for me now, and an adopted home city. But this is going to take time. It will not happen overnight.
John, thank you for being so candid with us today. You've certainly spoken about the challenges there at the moment, but also your ambitions and aims for the future, which exciting times, as you said, and we feel now that we're part of the journey. So thank you for sharing that with us. We're coming towards the end of the podcast now, and we'd just like to get a couple of reflections from you, I suppose. So I'll hand over to Gareth for our first one.
John, reflecting on the future, what would you most like the citizens of Birmingham to experience as a result of procurement changes you're implementing today?
I really would like them to see a much more prosperous city, a city that is investing in its people, and a city that can actually show the future is very much one of empowerment, but also one of ownership and responsibility for the world we live in. And the world we live in includes everything from, newborn babies coming into Birmingham, that they have a prosperous future and that they have a resilient local authority, one that is working and collaborating with both citizens and all of the people, all of the stakeholders that ultimately are charged with ensuring Birmingham has a brighter and much prosperous future.
And John, you've had such a long career and obviously much more to come in procurement. One of the things that the Powering Procurement podcasts are keen to do is to highlight the procurement profession as a career. And we know, like many different industries and sectors, there are recruitment issues. So bearing that in mind as a bit of context to this question, why would you say that you are happy that you have ended up in a career in procurement?
Ultimately, because the pound and the power of the pound never ceases to amaze me. It is a real powerful lever, very influential. And if you're performing well and you're delivering across, efficiency and value for money, you can use that pound to go so much further. So I would encourage anyone listening, considering a career, procurement. I was at an event in London about 9 months ago, and it was predominantly dominated by private sector. And for the first time ever, I heard people saying that actually chief procurement officers, they had the main seat at the board table, because CEOs and boards of private organisations absolutely get that procurement and commercial approach can resolve a lot of the challenges facing the world we live in today. So actually, if anything, I think procurement is beginning to blossom. If we can use sort of descriptive terms, I think maybe it's been, sort of below the surface bubbling along. And we have an opportunity, particularly the next 25 years, which will see me out, to really look at using this profession to deliver. And I've found that here in Birmingham, colleagues so want us to deliver and to use the power and the wealth that we have wisely. And we do that by actually planning strategically and ensuring that we're not frightened to go where, people maybe have not gone before. And we need to look to how we start to really do creative stuff around delivering under procurement.
Thank you, John. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's been so insightful, and we wish you all the best on your journey.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thanks, John. That wraps up this episode of Powering Procurement. We hope you enjoyed that as much as we did.
Visit our website at atomis.co.uk or follow us on LinkedIn to continue the conversation.
Remember to subscribe on YouTube and follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you choose to listen.
Thanks for joining us, and see you next time on Powering Procurement. The Powering Procurement podcast is brought to you by Atomis, source to contract software designed to save you time and money. Choose the apps you need, from pipeline and tender management to supplier and contract management. Get the tools to power up your procurement. Visit atomis.co.uk to learn more.